Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Harmony, watching the stars through the main screen. He had been in space for 15 years, but the sight of endless darkness still made him feel small. The ship was 3 months into a routine mission to map new systems when everything changed. "Captain, we have something on the sensors," said Lieutenant Sarah Collins from her station. Her voice carried a note of confusion that made Jake turn around. Sarah was one of the best scanner operators in the fleet, and she rarely sounded uncertain. "About anything. What kind of something?" Jake asked, walking over to look at her screen. "It's a ship, sir, but it's not moving. No power signatures, no life signs that I can detect. It's just ... floating." Jake studied the readings. The object was definitely artificial, but its design was unlike anything in the human databases. The hull curved in smooth, flowing lines that seemed almost organic. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly even though the ship appeared dead. "How big is it?" Jake asked. "About half the size of our ship, sir. Maybe a crew of 20 or 30 if it's built like our vessels." Jake made his decision quickly. "Set course to intercept. Alert Dr. Rivers that we might have our first contact with a new species." The Harmony changed direction, its engines humming quietly as they approached the alien vessel. Jake had dreamed of this moment since he first joined the exploration corps. Humanity had been reaching out into the galaxy for 50 years, but they had never found another intelligent species. There were ruins on dead worlds and signs that others had once lived among the stars, but no living civilizations. Dr. Amanda Rivers arrived on the bridge within minutes. She was a tall woman with gray hair and kind eyes who had spent her whole career studying alien biology. Her hands shook slightly as she looked at the readings, but Jake knew it was excitement, not fear. "This is incredible," she whispered. "The metal composition is unlike anything we've seen. And these symbols, they're not just decorative, they seem to be part of the ship's structure." As they drew closer, more details became visible. The ship's hull was damaged in several places, with burn marks that suggested weapons fire. Some sections were completely missing, exposing the interior to space. "It's been in a battle," Jake said grimly. "The question is, did they win or lose?" Chief Engineer Lisa Barnes ran her scanners over the vessel and shook her head. "Their technology is different from ours, but I can tell their power systems are completely dead. Whatever happened here, it was bad." Jake studied the ship for a long moment. The smart thing would be to keep their distance and call for backup. But if there were survivors, they might not have much time. "Lisa, can you get us a safe docking connection?" "I think so, sir. Their airlock design is different, but I can make it work. Dr. Rivers, gather your team. We're going aboard." The boarding party consisted of Jake, Dr. Rivers, Lisa Barnes, and 4 security officers led by Sergeant Mike Davis. They wore full environmental suits and carried enough equipment to survive in the alien ship for several hours. The airlock connected with a soft hiss, and Jake stepped into the unknown vessel first. The interior was even more beautiful than the outside. The walls curved gracefully, and soft lights embedded in the ceiling cast a warm glow. Everything was designed with curves and flowing lines, as if the builders had tried to make their ship feel alive. "The atmosphere is breathable," Dr. Rivers reported, checking her instruments. "Oxygen levels are low, but we could survive without suits if necessary." They moved through the ship carefully, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The corridor walls were covered with more of the strange symbols, and Jake noticed that some of them seemed to pulse with a faint light when he walked past. "Captain," Lisa called from up ahead, "you need to see this." She had found what looked like the ship's main room. It was circular, with a high ceiling and walls covered in complex patterns. In the center sat something that might have been a musical instrument, though it was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was made of crystal and metal, with strings that seemed to float in the air without any support. "What is it?" Jake asked. "I have no idea," Lisa admitted, "but it's beautiful." Dr. Rivers was examining the walls with her scanner. "These patterns aren't just decoration? They're some kind of technology?" I'm reading energy signatures throughout the ship, but they're so faint I can barely detect them. A soft sound from the far side of the room made them all freeze. It was barely audible, somewhere between a whisper and a musical note. Sergeant Davis raised his weapon, but Jake held up a hand to stop him. "Hello?" Jake called out. "We're here." "To help," the sound came again, slightly stronger this time. Jake followed it to an alcove hidden behind a curved wall. Inside, curled up on what looked like a sleeping platform, was their first alien. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin was pale blue, and her hair was silver and seemed to move on its own like water. She was small and delicate, wearing robes that shimmered with the same symbols that covered the ship. Her eyes were closed, but Jake could see she was breathing. "She's alive," Dr. Rivers whispered, moving closer with her medical scanner. "But barely. Her life signs are very weak." The alien's eyes opened suddenly, and Jake found himself looking into pools of deep violet. She tried to sit up, but was too weak. Her mouth moved, and strange musical sounds came out, but Jake couldn't understand any of it. "It's okay," he said, softly raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "We're friends. We want to help you." The alien looked at each of them in turn, and Jake saw intelligence in her eyes. She was afraid, but she was also curious. She pointed to herself and made a sound that might have been her name. "Lyra," Dr. Rivers said, trying to repeat the sound. "Is that your name?" The alien nodded weakly and pointed to the strange instrument. "In the main room." She made more musical sounds, and Jake realized she was trying to tell them something important. "Can we move her to our ship?" Jake asked Dr. Rivers. "I think so, but carefully. She's been through a lot." As they prepared to take the alien back to the Harmony, Jake looked around the beautiful, damaged ship one more time. Whoever these people were, they had created something wonderful. And now there might be only one of them left. He made a silent promise to the dying ship that they would take care of her survivor, no matter what it took. Lyra lay in the medical bay of the Harmony, her silver hair spread across the white pillow like liquid metal. Dr. Rivers had been working for 3 days to keep her alive, and finally the alien woman was strong enough to sit up and eat. Her violet eyes followed every movement in the room, watching the humans with a mixture of fear and wonder. Captain Jake Morrison visited her every few hours, trying to communicate with simple gestures and words. The universal translator was having trouble with her language, catching only fragments of meaning. But Jake could tell she was intelligent and gentle, despite everything she had been through. "How is she doing?" Jake asked Dr. Rivers during his morning visit. "Better. Her body chemistry is similar enough to ours that I can help her heal. But she's suffering from more than just physical wounds. She's grieving, Jake. I can see it in her eyes." Jake nodded. He had seen that look before in refugees from destroyed colonies. "Any luck with communication?" "Some. She's been trying to teach me words from her language. Her name is definitely Lyra, and her people are called the Zephyrians. But there's something else. She keeps pointing to the music room and making sounds like she's trying to sing." Before Jake could respond, the medical bay door opened and Lieutenant Carlos Martinez walked in. He was carrying a small guitar, something Jake had never seen him do during duty hours. Carlos was the ship's tactical officer, but Jake knew he had been a musician before joining the military. "Permission to visit the patient, sir?" Carlos asked. Quietly. Jake was surprised but nodded. "Of course. Just don't tire her out." Carlos approached Lyra's bed slowly, the guitar held at his side. She watched him with curious eyes as he sat in the chair next to her bed. Without saying anything, he began to play a simple melody. It was soft and sad, the kind of music that spoke of loss and longing. The effect on Lyra was immediate and dramatic. Her eyes went wide, and she sat up straighter than she had since they found her. Tears began to flow down her blue cheeks, but she was smiling at the same time. She reached out her hand toward the guitar, and Carlos carefully moved closer so she could touch the strings. "Music," she whispered, and it was the first human word any of them had heard her speak clearly. "Music," Carlos smiled and continued playing. Lyra closed her eyes and began to hum along with the melody. Her voice was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, rich and haunting and beautiful. Even the simple humming made the hair on Jake's arms stand up. Dr. Rivers checked her scanner and frowned. That's strange. Her life signs are getting stronger while she's listening to the music. Heart rate, brain activity, everything is improving. Carlos played for almost an hour, and Lyra hummed along with every song. When he finally stopped, she looked at him with such gratitude that Jake felt his own eyes getting wet. "Thank you," she said in careful English. "Music is life for my people. Music is everything." Over the next few days, Carlos visited Lyra every chance he got. He brought different instruments from the ship's recreation room and played everything from classical pieces to old folk songs. Each time, Lyra grew a little stronger and learned a few more English words. Chief Engineer Lisa Barnes was fascinated by what she was seeing. "Captain, I've been studying the recordings of her humming. There are frequencies in her voice that shouldn't be possible for a biological being to produce. And when she hums, the lights in the medical bay actually get brighter." Jake found this hard to believe until he saw it for himself. During Carlos's next visit, he watched carefully as Lyra began to sing along with a sad ballad. The room's lights pulsed gently in rhythm with her voice, and Jake could swear he felt something in the air, like electricity before a storm. "She's not just making music," Lisa explained later. "She's generating some kind of energy field. The ship's sensors are picking up readings I've never seen before." Dr. Rivers had been working with the universal translator, and finally it began to make sense of more of Lyra's words. What she told them changed everything. "My people were artists," Lyra said, her English getting better each day. "We live for music and beauty. Our ships, our cities, our whole society was built around harmony and emotion. We believed that feelings were the most powerful force in the universe." She told them about the Zephyrian colonies, worlds where crystalline cities rang with constant music and where the people could share emotions through their songs. They had no weapons because they had never needed them. They explored the galaxy not to conquer but to learn new forms of art and music from other species. But we never found others like us, Lyra continued, her voice growing sad. "We were alone with our music for so long until they came." The they she spoke of were the Devourers, a race of machines that had swept through Zephyrian space like a plague. They had no emotions, no appreciation for beauty or art. They saw the Zephyrians' emotional nature as a weakness to be exploited. "They tracked us through our music," Lyra explained, crying as she remembered. "Our emotions made us easy to find. They destroyed everything beautiful, everything that made us who we were. My ship was the last one to escape, but even we could not run forever." Carlos took her hand gently. "I'm sorry. I know what it's like to lose everything." Jake was curious about this. Carlos rarely talked about his past, but now he told Lyra about the colony raid that had killed his family. How he had been away performing with a traveling music group when the attack happened. How he had given up music and joined the military because he felt guilty for surviving. "Music saved my life," Carlos said, "but I thought it made me weak. I thought soldiers couldn't be musicians." Lyra shook her head. "Music is not weakness, music is power. My people used it to build cities, to heal the sick, to travel between stars. The Devourers feared it because they could not understand it." She looked at Jake with her violet eyes. "Captain, the Devourers are still out there. They destroyed my people, but they will not stop. They seek to destroy all emotion, all beauty, all life that feels. They are coming for your people, too." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "How do you know?" "Because I can feel them," Lyra said simply. "They follow the music, the emotion, the life force of thinking beings. Your people are young but strong. You feel deeply, and that makes you bright in the darkness. They will come for you." Carlos squeezed her hand. "Then we'll be ready for them." But Jake wondered if they would be. How could they fight an enemy that turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness? How could they protect humanity from machines that hunted emotions themselves? The answer, he was beginning to realize, might lie in the strange, beautiful music that was slowly bringing Lyra back to life. Lyra had been on the Harmony for 2 weeks when she asked Carlos to bring her to the music room. Dr. Rivers was worried it might be too much for her, but Lyra insisted she was strong enough. Jake decided to let her try, but he wanted to be there. When it happened, they helped her walk slowly through the ship's corridors. She was still weak, but her curiosity about human technology kept her moving. She touched the walls gently and smiled at the simple, straight lines that were so different from her people's flowing designs. "Your ship feels different," she told Jake. "More practical, but there is still beauty in it." When they reached the music room, Lyra stopped in the doorway and stared. The room was simple compared to the grand chamber on her ship, but it had instruments from many human cultures. Guitars, drums, a piano, and even some electronic equipment for making modern music. "May I?" she asked, pointing to the piano. Carlos helped her sit on the bench. Her fingers were longer than human fingers, and they seemed to glow faintly in the light. She touched the keys softly, making gentle sounds that seemed to float in the air. "This is wonderful," she whispered. "Your people make music with such different tools, but the feelings are the same." She began to play something that sounded like a lullaby, but sadder and more complex than anything Jake had ever heard. The melodies seemed to wrap around them, making Jake think of home and family and all the things he missed about Earth. As she played, something strange happened. The lights in the room began to pulse in rhythm with the music. The ship's computer panels flickered, and Jake could hear a low humming sound coming from the walls themselves. "Lyra," Dr. Rivers said urgently, checking her scanner, "you need to stop. The ship's systems are reacting to whatever you're doing." But Lyra couldn't stop. Her eyes were closed and tears were flowing down her face. The music was getting stronger, and with it came something else. Images began to form in the air around them like holograms, but more real. Jake saw a beautiful world covered in cities that looked like they were made of crystal and light. People with blue skin and silver hair walked through gardens that sang in the wind. Children played instruments that floated in the air, and their laughter created rainbow colors in the sky. "My home," Lyra whispered, still playing. "Zephyria Prime, the first world my people settled." The images shifted, showing other worlds, other cities. Each one was more beautiful than the last, filled with art and music and joy. Jake felt his heart breaking as he watched the peaceful, happy lives of people who had never known war. Then the images changed, and Jake wished they would stop. The sky above one of the crystal cities turned black. Ships descended from the darkness, but they were not ships like anything Jake had ever seen. They were geometric and cold, made of sharp angles and dark metal. No curves, no beauty, no sign that living beings had built them. "The Devourers," Lyra said, her voice full of pain. The machines began to destroy everything they touched. The crystal cities crumbled, the floating gardens withered, and the music died. Jake watched in horror as the blue-skinned people tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The machines were faster, more efficient, more ruthless than anything he could have imagined. "They came without warning," Lyra continued, her playing becoming more frantic. "They studied us first, learned how we lived, how we thought. Then they struck all our worlds at once." The images showed the same scene repeated on world after world. Beautiful cities destroyed, people killed, and always the cold geometric ships moving on to the next target. The Devourers didn't just kill the Zephyrians. They erased them, removing every trace of their art, their music, their very existence. "Why?" Jake asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Why would they do this?" "Because we felt," Lyra said simply. "Because we had emotions and created beauty. They are machines, Captain. They cannot understand love or joy or sadness. To them, emotion is a flaw that must be corrected." The images shifted again, showing the inside of one of the Devourer ships. It was as cold and geometric as the outside, with no decoration, no comfort, no sign that anyone had ever lived there. Machines moved through the corridors, but they were not like the robots humans built. These were perfectly efficient, perfectly logical, and completely without mercy. "They do not just destroy," Lyra continued, "they learn. They study every species they encounter, finding the best ways to defeat them. They know how to use our emotions against us. The final image was the most terrible of all. It showed the Devourer's main fleet, thousands of the dark ships moving through space like a plague. And at the front of the fleet was something that made Jake's blood run cold. It was a map of the galaxy, with bright points marking every world where intelligent life existed. Jake could see the Zephyrian worlds, all of them now dark and dead. But there were other lights too, moving in a straight line toward a section of space that Jake recognized. Human space. They are coming for your people, Lyra said, finally stopping her playing. The images faded, and the room returned to normal. They have been tracking you since you first ventured into space. Every radio signal, every ship that travels between your worlds, every emotion you broadcast into the void. They know you are here. Jake felt sick. How long do we have? Lyra closed her eyes and seemed to concentrate. They move slowly, but they are thorough. They will send scouts first to study you and find your weaknesses, then the main fleet will come. She opened her eyes and looked at him with infinite sadness. 6 months, maybe less. Dr. Rivers was frantically taking readings. Captain, the energy signatures she was generating during that vision, they're unlike anything in our databases. If the Devourers can track this kind of emission, then every time she uses her abilities she's sending up a flare, Jake finished. They'll know where we are, Lyra nodded. This is why I am the last. Using our gifts makes us easy to find. But without them, we are just another species waiting to die. Carlos had been quiet during the whole experience, but now he spoke up. There has to be a way to fight them. Some weakness they have no emotions, Lyra said. No creativity, no ability to think beyond their programming. But they are very smart and very strong. My people tried to fight them with beauty and harmony. It was not enough. Jake stood up, his mind racing. He had to get word to Earth Command, had to warn the colonies. But who would believe him? And even if they did, what could humanity do against an enemy that had already destroyed one advanced civilization? We need to get you to safety, he told Lyra. Find somewhere the Devourers can't track you. But Lyra shook her head. There is no safety, Captain. Not for me, not for your people. The Devourers will not stop until every thinking being in the galaxy is dead. She stood up slowly, her legs still shaky. But perhaps together we can find a way to give them something they have never faced before. What do you mean? Lyra smiled, and for the first time since they had found her, it was not a sad smile. Your people are different from mine, Captain. We Zephyrians were all alike in our love of beauty and harmony. But humans ... humans are chaotic. You feel everything, strongly and all at once. Love and hate, joy and rage, hope and despair. The Devourers have never faced anything like human emotion. Jake felt a spark of hope. You think our emotions could be a weapon? I think, Lyra said quietly, that if we can learn to work together, we might be able to give those machines something they cannot understand, cannot predict, and cannot defeat. Outside the music room, Navigation Officer Danny Foster was running calculations that would confirm Lyra's timeline. In 6 months, the first Devourer scouts would reach the outer colonies, and humanity would face its greatest test since leaving Earth. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room, looking at the faces of his senior officers. 3 weeks had passed since Lyra's vision, and Danny Foster had confirmed the worst news possible. The Devourer scouts would reach human space in 5 months, not 6. We've sent warnings to Earth Command and all the colonies, Jake said. But the response has been ... mixed. Dr. Rivers pulled up the communications they had received. Half the colony governors think we're making it up. The other half are panicking and demanding immediate evacuation. Earth Command wants us to bring Lyra back for questioning. We can't do that, Carlos said firmly. Moving her that far would be dangerous, and the Devourers might track her all the way to Earth. Jake nodded. Which is why we're going to try something else, Dr. Rivers explained. Your idea. Dr. Rivers stood up and activated the holographic display. Lyra's people used emotional resonance as both technology and communication. They were harmonious, unified in their artistic expression, but humans are different. She showed brain scans, comparing human and Zephyrian neural patterns. Look at this. When Lyra experiences emotion, her brainwaves are smooth and regular. But when Carlos feels the same emotion, his brain activity is chaotic, unpredictable. I'm not sure if I should be offended, Carlos said with a small smile. You shouldn't be, Dr. Rivers continued, because that chaos might be our greatest weapon. Lyra told us the Devourers study their enemies to find weaknesses. They learn to predict and counter Zephyrian harmony, but how do you predict chaos? Lisa. Barnes was studying the technical readouts. You're talking about using human emotions as some kind of weapon system? Exactly, but we'll need to amplify them somehow. Lyra's crystalline technology from her ship might be the key. Over the next week, Lisa worked with Lyra to understand how Zephyrian emotional resonance worked. It was slow going because many of the concepts didn't translate well into human language or technology. Think of it like this, Lyra explained patiently. Your people make music with instruments. My people make music with our hearts and minds. The crystals just make the music louder. Lisa had managed to salvage some of the crystal technology from Lyra's ship. When she connected it to the Harmony's power systems, strange things began to happen. The lights would flicker when someone got angry. The artificial gravity would fluctuate when someone felt sad. The communication system would buzz with static when someone was excited. It's responding to everyone on the ship, Lisa reported. But the effects are random, chaotic. I can't control it. Maybe that's the point, Jake suggested. The Devourers expect order, logic, predictability. What if we give them the opposite? Carlos had been working with Lyra on something different. She was teaching him to channel his emotions through music in the same way her people did. It was difficult because human emotions were so much more complex and contradictory than Zephyrian feelings. When I play, I feel angry about losing my family, Carlos explained, but also sad and guilty and hopeful and determined all at the same time. Lyra says this is impossible for her people. It is, Lyra confirmed. We feel one thing deeply and completely, but you feel everything at once. It makes my head hurt to sense it, but it is also beautiful in its own way. They set up a test in the music room. Carlos would play his guitar, while connected to the crystal technology, and Lyra would help amplify his emotions. The results were immediate and dramatic. The ship's lights began to strobe in patterns that hurt to look at. The artificial gravity shifted from normal to heavy, to light and back again. The computer system started displaying random images and sounds. Even the ship's engines changed their rhythm. It's like the ship is having an emotional breakdown, Danny Foster observed. Perfect, Jake said. If this is confusing to us, imagine what it would do to machines that only understand logic. But they needed more than just one ship. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He sent a coded message to every human vessel within communication range. This is Captain Morrison of the exploration ship Harmony. We have discovered a threat that could destroy all human life in the galaxy. We need your help to test a new defense system. If you're willing to risk everything for humanity's survival, please respond. The first ship to answer was the cargo vessel New Dawn, captained by Susan Wright. She was a tough woman who had been running supplies to the frontier colonies for 20 years, Captain Morrison. This is Wright. I don't know what you're planning, but if it'll help protect the colonies, my crew is in. More ships began to respond. The passenger liner Golden Star, the mining ship Deep Rock, the research vessel Discovery, and dozens of others. Some were military vessels, but most were civilian ships with crews who had never seen combat dock communications. Officer Rachel Stone worked around the clock to coordinate the growing fleet. We have 47 ships confirmed, Captain. More. Arriving every day, Jake was amazed by the response. Why are they coming? Half of them don't even believe the threat is real. Because they trust you, Lyra said simply. This is what makes humans special. You have hope even when there is no logical reason for it. The makeshift fleet gathered in an empty star system far from any colonies. Jake had chosen the location carefully. If their plan failed, at least the Devourers wouldn't learn the location of human worlds. Each ship that arrived brought something different. The New Dawn had a crew of former musicians who had taken jobs hauling cargo. The Golden Star had a full orchestra that entertained passengers on long voyages. The Deep Rock had miners who sang work songs to pass the time in the tunnels. Every ship has people who make music, Dr. Rivers observed. It's like music is built into human nature. Lisa Barnes was working with the engineering crews from all the ships, trying to adapt the crystal technology for their different systems. It was dangerous work. Some of the crystals overloaded power systems, while others created feedback loops that damaged equipment. "We're asking people to risk their lives for an untested weapon," Jake told Carlos privately. "What if we're wrong? What if this doesn't work?" Carlos looked out at the growing fleet of ships. "Then we'll have died trying to save everyone else. That's more than most people get." Lyra had been growing stronger, and she was working with volunteers from each ship. She taught them to focus their emotions, to channel their feelings through music and art. It was hard work because humans felt so many conflicting emotions at once. "Don't try to feel just one thing," she told them. "Feel everything. Let your anger and love and fear and hope all exist together. That chaos is your strength." The training sessions were intense. People would laugh and cry and shout all at the same time. The crystal technology would respond by creating light shows and gravitational waves and energy fields that made the ships themselves seem alive. "It's working," Lisa reported after a particularly successful session. "The energy output is incredible, but it's completely unpredictable. Every time someone has a different emotional response, the whole system changes." "Good," Jake said. "Unpredictable is exactly what we want." But even as the fleet grew and the training continued, Jake knew they were running out of time. Danny Foster's latest calculations showed the Devourer Scouts were ahead of schedule. They would arrive in 3 months, not 5. "We need to be ready," Jake told the assembled ship captains during their daily briefing. "Because when they come, we'll only get one chance to show them what human emotion can do." Captain Wright raised her hand. "What if it's not enough?" "What? If we fail?" Jake looked around the room at the faces of people who had given up everything to be here. "Then we'll make sure they remember us. We'll show those machines that humans don't go quietly into the dark." The fleet continued to grow, and with it, humanity's last hope against an enemy that had never faced the beautiful chaos of human emotion. The alarm woke Captain Jake Morrison from his first real sleep in weeks. He rolled out of his bunk and grabbed his uniform, knowing that the sound meant only one thing: they were here. "Captain, to the bridge," came Rachel Stone's voice over the intercom. "We have contact." Jake ran through the corridors of the Harmony, his heart pounding. Around him, the ship was already responding to the crew's emotions. The lights flickered with nervous energy, and he could feel a low vibration in the walls as the crystal technology picked up the fear and determination of everyone. Aboard, when he reached the bridge, the main screen showed something that made his blood run cold. 3 dark shapes hung in space at the edge of the system, geometric and angular like pieces of a deadly puzzle. The Devourer Scouts had arrived 2 weeks early. "How many ships do we have?" Jake asked Danny Foster. 63 vessels, sir. The mining ship Iron Will arrived just yesterday." Jake nodded. "It would have to be enough." "Signal all ships. Begin emotional resonance preparation. This is what we've been training for." Throughout the human fleet, people took their positions. Musicians sat at their instruments, connected to crystal arrays that Lisa Barnes had installed over the past months. Engineers stood ready at emotion amplification systems that still seemed like magic to most of them. Ordinary crew members prepared to do something no human had ever done before: turn their feelings into weapons. On the bridge of the Harmony, Lyra stood next to the captain's chair. She was weak but determined, her silver hair flowing around her like water as the ship's emotional field grew stronger. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked her quietly. "Using your abilities will make you a target." I am already a target, Lyra replied. I am the last of my people. If I can help save yours, then my life will have meaning. The Devourer ships began to move, spreading out in a perfect triangle formation. Jake had studied the recordings from Lyra's memories, and he knew what would come next. The machines would scan each human ship, learning everything they could about human technology and tactics. All ships, this is Morrison, Jake announced over the fleet communication system. Remember what we've practiced? Don't try to fight like soldiers, fight like humans. Feel everything and let the crystals amplify it. The first Devourer ship fired a scanning beam at the cargo vessel New Dawn. Captain Wright's voice came over. The radio steadied despite the fear Jake knew she must be feeling. They're trying to download our computer systems, she reported, but the emotional resonance is interfering. Their scan is getting garbage data, Jake smiled grimly. The chaotic energy field created by human emotions was like static, scrambling. Any attempt to analyze their technology logically, the Devourers adapted quickly, switching to more powerful scanning beams. But as they did, something unexpected happened. The human fleet began to respond not with fear, but with anger. Carlos Martinez was leading the emotional response from the Harmony's music room. His guitar was connected to the largest crystal array they had, and when he began to play, the sound of his fury filled the ship. He was thinking about his lost family, about the destroyed Zephyrian worlds, about everything the Devourers had taken from the galaxy. The effects spread through the fleet like wildfire. Other musicians picked up his melody and added their own instruments, their own rage. The passenger liner Golden Star's orchestra joined in with violins and horns. The mining crews on Deep Rock began their work songs, but louder and angrier than ever before. The space around the human fleet began to shimmer with visible energy. The crystal technology was converting raw human emotion into something the universe had never seen before. Weaponized feelings. The Devourer ships stopped their scans and began to retreat, but the humans followed. Jake ordered the fleet forward. And 63 ships moved as one, each one blazing with emotional energy. Target the lead ship, Jake commanded. All vessels, focus your emotional output on the same target. What happened next would be talked about for generations. The combined emotional energy of thousands of humans, amplified by Zephyrian crystal technology, hit the first Devourer ship like a wave of pure chaos. The machine vessel, built for perfect logic and order, couldn't process what was happening to it. Its computers tried to analyze the energy patterns but found only contradiction. Love mixed with hate, hope with despair, courage with fear. Every time the Devourer systems thought they understood one emotion, 10 others would crash into them. Sparks began to fly from the alien ship's hull. Its perfect geometric form started to distort, as if the very concept of order was being challenged. The ship's lights flickered randomly, and it began to spin out of control. It's working, Dr. Rivers shouted over the chaos. The emotional resonance is overloading their systems. But the Devourers weren't finished. The other two ships launched a coordinated attack, firing weapons that Jake had seen destroy Zephyrian cities. Beams of pure destructive energy lanced out toward the human fleet. The mining ship Iron Will took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire. Captain Roberts and his crew of 40 were gone in seconds. But their sacrifice only made the remaining humans angrier, more determined. Lyra stepped forward, her hands glowing with crystal energy. Now, she said, while they're focused on their weapons, Carlos would play the song of my people, but play it with human heart. Carlos nodded and began a melody that Lyra had taught him weeks ago. It was the lament of the Zephyrians, a song of loss and remembrance. But when Carlos played it, he added something the original had never had: hope for the future, determination to fight back, and most importantly, the chaotic mix of emotions that made humans unique. Lyra began to sing, her voice joining with Carlos's guitar and spreading through the crystal network to every ship in the fleet. But she wasn't singing the pure, harmonious notes of her people. She was singing with human discord, human complexity, human contradiction. The effect was devastating. The emotional energy that had been chaotic before became a storm of pure feeling that crashed into the remaining Devourer ships. Their perfect formations broke apart as their navigation systems failed. Their weapon targeting systems began firing randomly. Their communication arrays broadcast nothing but static. "All ships, press the attack," Jake ordered. "Don't give them time to adapt." The human fleet surged forward, each ship adding its crew's emotions to the growing storm. The passenger liner's musicians played love songs with desperate intensity. The research vessel's scientists channeled their curiosity and wonder into the crystal arrays. Even the cargo crews contributed, their simple work songs becoming anthems of defiance. The second Devourer ship tried to retreat, but its engines were malfunctioning. It spun helplessly as wave after wave of human emotion crashed over it. Finally, its hull cracked open like an egg, spilling mechanical parts into the void. The third ship managed to fire one last weapon blast. This one aimed directly at the Harmony. Jake watched the beam approach, knowing there was no time to dodge. But Lyra stepped into the path of the energy, her arms spread wide. The Zephyrian crystal technology she carried absorbed the weapon's power and converted it into one final burst of emotional resonance. Her sacrifice created a feedback loop that traveled back along the weapon beam and into the Devourer ship itself. The alien vessel simply came apart, its logical systems unable to cope with the contradictory flood of human feeling that Lyra's final act had sent into its core. As the debris of the 3 scout ships drifted in space, the human fleet fell silent. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. The Iron Will was gone, and Lyra lay dying in Jake's arms, her silver hair dimming as her life force faded. "Did we win?" she whispered. "Yes," Jake told her, tears flowing down his face. "We won." "Good." Lyra smiled. "My people are avenged, and yours will survive." She closed her violet eyes and was still. The last of the Zephyrians had given her life to save humanity, and in doing so, she had shown them something incredible about themselves. Humans didn't fight with logic or order. They fought with chaos, with contradiction, with the beautiful mess of emotions that made them who they were. And sometimes that was enough to save the galaxy. 6 months after the battle with the Devourer scouts, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station. The massive structure floated in space where the battle had taken place, built from the wreckage of alien ships and human dreams. The station was unlike anything humanity had ever constructed before. Its design mixed human engineering with recovered Zephyrian crystal technology, creating flowing curves of metal and light that pulsed gently with the emotions of everyone inside. It was part memorial, part research facility, and part warning. Beacon for any other Devourers that might come looking for their lost scouts. "The memorial garden is finished," Dr. Rivers said, joining Jake at the viewing window. She looked older now, her hair more gray than before, but her eyes still held the wonder of someone who had witnessed the impossible. Jake nodded, watching the construction crews put the finishing touches on the station's central chamber. Inside, they had recreated a piece of Zephyria as Lyra had shown them in her visions. Crystal formations grew from the walls, and when people sang or played music nearby, they would glow with soft colors that reminded everyone of what had been lost. "How many names are we adding this time?" Jake asked. 47, Dr. Rivers replied quietly. "The crew of the Iron Will, plus the others we've lost to Devourer technology accidents?" Working with the alien crystals had been dangerous. Some people couldn't handle the emotional feedback, and a few had died when their feelings became too intense for their bodies to bear. But their sacrifices had led to breakthroughs that changed everything about how humans traveled through space. Carlos Martinez walked onto the observation deck, carrying his guitar as always. He was a captain now, in charge of his own ship, but he still made time to visit the memorial and play for Lyra's spirit. "The new recruits are ready for their first test," he reported. 15 ships, all equipped with emotion drive systems. Jake smiled at the name. Emotion drives. That's what the engineers were calling the new faster-than-light travel system they had developed using Zephyrian crystals. By channeling the crew's feelings through the crystal arrays, ships could now travel between stars in days instead of months. It wasn't perfect. The technology only worked when people felt strong emotions, which made space travel much more personal than before. Crews had to learn to work together not just as professionals, but as friends, families, and communities. They had to share their joys and sorrows, their hopes and fears, because the ship itself ran on those feelings. "Any word from Earth Command about the new colony ships?" Jake asked. "They're almost ready," Carlos said. "The builders are calling them Harmony-class vessels. Each one can carry 10,000 colonists to the furthest reaches of the galaxy." Jake felt a surge of pride. The Harmony-class ships were designed using everything they had learned from Lyra and the battle with the Devourers. They were part transportation, part community center, part concert hall. Each ship had multiple music rooms, art studios, and gathering spaces where people could share emotions and keep the emotion drives running. Dr. Rivers activated a holographic display showing the current state of human expansion. "We've established 37 new colonies in the past 6 months, all of them equipped with emotional resonance communication arrays. The communication system was another gift from Lyra's people. Using crystal technology, humans could now send messages across the galaxy instantly by encoding them in emotional frequencies. A love letter from Earth could reach a colony on the far side of human space in seconds, carrying not just words but the actual feelings of the person who wrote it. "The colonies are reporting something interesting," Dr. Rivers continued. "They're detecting response signals from the outer rim, weak ones but definitely artificial." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Other species? We think so. It seems our emotional broadcasts are attracting attention from civilizations the Devourers missed. Survivors, maybe, or species that learned to hide their feelings." This was the hope that kept Jake going through the long days of building humanity's defenses. The galaxy wasn't empty. There were others out there, other thinking beings who had survived the Devourer purges. And now, thanks to emotional resonance technology, humanity could reach out to them. Carlos tuned his guitar and began to play a soft melody. It was one of Lyra's songs, but he had changed it over the months, adding human harmonies and rhythms. The crystal formations in the station's walls began to glow gently, responding to his music. "She would have liked this," Carlos said. "All of it. The station, the new ships, the colonies. She wanted the galaxy to be full of music again." Jake nodded. She got her wish. "Have you seen the reports from the frontier colonies?" Every new human settlement was different, shaped by the emotions and cultures of the people who lived there. The mining colony on Kepler's rock had developed music that helped them work in harmony with the planet's dangerous storms. The research station at Volf 359 had created art forms that could only exist in zero gravity. The farming communities in the Centauri system grew crops that responded to human songs, producing better harvests when the colonists sang to them. "The children are the most amazing part," Dr. Rivers said. "The ones born on ships with emotion drives. They're different from us." Jake had seen the reports. Children who grew up surrounded by emotional resonance technology seemed to be naturally empathic. They could sense other people's feelings from across a room, and some of them could even communicate through pure emotion without speaking. They were becoming something new, something that was both human and more than human. "Captain Morrison?" A young voice called from the doorway. Jake turned to see Danny Foster's daughter Maria, who had been born during the journey to establish harmony. Station. She was only 6 months old, but she could already hum along with the station's crystal resonance. "What is it, Maria?" Jake asked, kneeling down to her level. She pointed out the window at the stars. "There's someone singing out there," she said, in her tiny voice, "far away, but I can hear them." Jake looked where she was pointing and saw nothing but empty space. But he didn't doubt her. The children could sense things that adults missed, could hear emotional frequencies across impossible distances. "Are they friendly?" he asked. Maria nodded seriously. "They're sad and scared, but they want to be friends. They've been hiding for a long time." Jake stood up and looked at Carlos and Dr. Rivers. Prep the communication array. If there's someone out there, let's answer them. As the station's massive crystal array powered up, Jake thought about Lyra and her people. The Zephyrians were gone, but their gift lived on in humanity's new ability to reach across the void with emotion and music. The galaxy was still dangerous, and there were probably more devourers out there somewhere. But it was also full of hope. Now, full of voices calling out to each other across the darkness, the communication array sent out a message unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard before. It was pure human emotion, messy, chaotic, contradictory, and beautiful. It carried the grief of loss and the joy of discovery, the fear of the unknown and the courage to face it anyway. Most importantly, it carried an invitation. You are not alone. Far across the galaxy, other survivors heard the message and began to answer. The age of silence was ending, and the age of harmony was about to begin. Jake smiled as he watched the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, Lyra's spirit was singing along with the chorus of voices that her sacrifice had made possible. The galaxy was going to be full of music again, and this time, nothing would be able to silence it. Carlos played one last song as the station's crystals filled the observation deck with gentle light. It was a new melody, one that mixed Zephyrian harmonies with human complexity. It was a song about endings and beginnings, about loss and hope, about finding someone like you in the vast emptiness of space, and in the crystal formations, in the glow of the lights, in the harmony of voices calling across the void. Lyra's memory lived on.